Welcome, welcome council, welcome councillors, staff and the gallery. I formally officially opening the May meeting of council, and I would therefore invite you to join me in acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting, and to thank the Paramank, Nadri and Kaurna peoples for caring for our lands and waters across the Barossa region. One of the ways that we can honour this heritage is to pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. Councillors, I do have an apology from Councillor Troop. She's slightly unwell, so no, we don't have to move. We'll just note that Councillor Troop is an apology for this evening's meeting. The minutes for the previous meeting for confirmation, and that was the council meeting held on the 18th of April 2023. Someone that moved those minutes, Councillor Hearn, and seconded Councillor De Vries. All those in favour? Carried. Item 3.2.1 is a visitor to the meeting, and it's always nice to see Ian Baldwin back in our chamber, a previous director, and always good to catch up with you again, Ian. And Mr Baldwin is the chair of the Gawler River Flood Management Authority, and he has come along this evening to talk to us and give us a little bit more information with regard to the business case funding needs. And as you're aware, there is an agenda item a little bit later on in the meeting. So welcome, Ian, because, you know, I'm not used to calling you Mr Baldwin, so I better not start.
No, thank you, Mayor Lange, and thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to address you tonight. Yes, we're talking about the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority. Over many years, you've probably learnt a bit about the authority and what it does. I have had the opportunity of reading the Chief Executive's Officer's report tonight. I'm hoping that that will be supported by Council as you work through your business tonight. You'll notice, tongue-in-cheek, this comment. I do have the Barossa Council at the bottom of the slide. It is in red. I'm hoping at the end of this meeting we might change that to black with a contribution that might be available.
He hasn't changed yet.
We'll move on. Just some history. Some of the councillors will probably be aware of some of the points that I have up on the screen there. We know that we've got 170 years of data recorded. We also know that on average every 10 years we receive floods in the Gawler River. Recent floods, 1983, 1992, 2005 and 2016. The last three I've indicated there have an average loss for that event of $40 million. So that's $120 million over three events in the Gawler River. It's quite a considerable amount. And that's the reason why we're trying to mitigate against that damage and loss. Of course, that 120 million or 40 million per event doesn't include a costing of the social impacts. That can run out to a considerable amount also. And of course, the last event was in 2016 and we're getting closer to the next event. That's not to say that it's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years. It could be another 20 years. But what we probably can conclude is that the next event we get is likely to be possibly larger than we've experienced in the last 2 or 3 due to climate change. Okay, so after 1983 and the 1992 flood events, the six councils started to come together and discuss how they might be able to manage or mitigate against floods in the Gawler River. In 2002, the GRFMA was formed, and the next flood event we had followed shortly after in 2005. In 2007, there was some priority given to building the Bruce Eastick North Para Flood Mitigation Dam. It was designed to provide 1 in 100-year protection against flood. What we found was a year after it being completed, they revised the flood data and it was no longer a 1 in 100-year protection feature. It now provides a 1 in 40-year protection to the Gawler River in the case of flood. In 2012, part of the funding that was provided to build the Bruce Eastick Dam also carried over to look at raising the South Para reservoir wall that was raised about 1.2 metres from memory, which provided 1 in 100-year protection for the South Para. 2018, there's been quite a lot of work done, hydrology reviews, just looking at what the options are for mitigation. 2018, there was a proposal for the Northern Floodway that resulted from a lot of investigation following the 2016 flood. We were perhaps close to getting that work done, but unfortunately, one of the councils, Adelaide Plains Council, decided that it might make application to withdraw from the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority. At the time, we were advocating for quite a large amount of money from both the state and federal government. The state government in particular said to the authority, unless you can get the councils working collegiately with this, there won't be any money coming from the state government. And we lost the opportunity at that time to get some work done. We've continued to work away, and 2 years ago now, we entered into partnership with the state government, particularly the Department for Environment and Water, to look at a project with an allocation of $9 million to look at 4 no-regret projects. And that work has been progressing in the last 2 years, and that budget is starting to get to the point where it will be spent within that time, apart from some work that is being done in the Playford area, which has run into a few problems with developers and will have to be delayed for completion. The $9 million is the state government's allocation. It was asking for equal contributions from local government for that $9 million expense. Of course, that wasn't supported by local government. But with 2 of the projects in particular, there has been contribution made by Playford Council and Gawler Council amounting to $1.85 million. What the authority requested was that any funds that were contributed by council should be spent with flood mitigation options and works to be done. So the 1.85 million now has been invested into the development of a business case for the Gawler River. local government's contribution, aside from its contribution to the 4 no regret projects, is only $42,000 against the business case initiative cost of $2.04 million. So you can see it's a bit slim. What's that again? The business case development follows the Infrastructure SA Assurance Framework, and that framework is applied to any projects with a capital value of greater than $50 million. It's a very comprehensive assessment that's undertaken, looking at a number of options, in fact, looking as many options as they can determine for this sort of project, looking at the benefit that it's likely to provide, the risks associated with any works that might be done or may not be done, whichever the case might be. It will look at some design work. If it is that the Bruce Eastick Dam is to be increased in height, there will be some design work carried out on the dam to prove that that work is possible. Of course, the other thing is the cost of the work. So any project that might evolve from the assurance framework must be costed, and of course that's important when it comes to determining funding for the works to be undertaken. Completion of the assurance framework is a state government requirement. For funding, if we are to get funding for any works into the future, we must have that business case completed. It also provides a step up to federal government. If the federal government can see that that work's been done and there are directions in hand and it has been properly costed, then there's potential for us to advocate for funding from federal government for that works to be done. What has been said in the past, particularly by state government, is that any project like this should be funded on the basis of equal contribution by federal, state and local government. The authority has advocated against that and suggested that the capital cost should be met by federal and state government in equal proportions, or however they might see that work. And local government would be responsible for the upkeep of the infrastructure put in place. So we would become, as we are currently, responsible for the operation and maintenance of the Bruce Eastick Dam and other infrastructure that we might put in place. The business case at this point in time, we've completed the first gateway, which is the first step in the process, and we're progressing, working with Infrastructure SA and the Business Case Project Committee, looking at progressing the second stage of the gateway process, which will get us to a point where we know the direction, we know the cost, and hopefully there's support through a consultation process with local government, with other stakeholders, to make sure that it is heading in the right direction. Gateway 2 is due for completion December this year. It will look at the stormwater management plan that's currently being undertaken by the authority, and the business case priorities do align the initial reports that have been done so far. And that's important. Had they not aligned, we would be back to the drawing board. We're currently looking at the potential to raise the Bruce Eastick Dam 5 metres, 10 and even up to 15 metres if it's appropriate and possible to do so. Of course, if it is raised 10 to 15 metres, it's going to have an impact upstream on properties because there will be some inundation that may occur, particularly at flood events. So the work will be done will determine whether the Bruce Eastick Dam raise is possible and whether it's going to achieve what's envisaged. The Bruce Eastick Dam will also, or what they're also looking at is obviously with the announcement that Concordia might go ahead in future years, is trying to coordinate and build in the east-west corridor for access from Concordia out to the Sturt Highway. So that's something that's been suggested for some time, and there will be work undertaken by the business case to prove whether that can be done or not. And of course, design estimated costs will come from that. There are many other options that are being considered in relation to flood mitigation. There is a monthly meeting and assessment of works that are being undertaken and the options, the risks associated with that. So there's constant review as this process works through. Toward an outcome, you've heard and read that the business case is critical. If we're going to achieve anything with flood mitigation in the Gawler River now, it is once this business case is completed. It will provide direction. We're hoping that constituent councils will be on board, and I'm talking about the 6 member councils of the authority. We hope that the feds and state government will be supportive of the outcomes, and we'll see the possibility of funding any capital works that need to be undertaken. Councils will benefit, including Barossa Council, and particularly more so now with the thought that Concordia development may go ahead. 10,000 homes to be built in that area. Most of the stormwater that was shed from that development will find its way into the North Parra above the Gawler River. Some will enter upstream of the Bruce Eastick Dam. Other will probably enter downstream depending on how that design works through. So at this stage, all I can say is I'm hoping that Council will support the report that's currently before you, and that we can get a contribution of the 52,000, which will be put forward for completion of the business case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. The future report, I think, raises and clarifies a few points, but is there any particular questions that members may have while Mr. Baldwin's there? Councillor Priest?
Thank you, William, for that presentation.
Sorry, yep.
Oh, no.
Thank you for that presentation, Ian. Now, I am led to believe that the business plan is just about running out of monies to complete it. Is that correct? Or it's either run out or it's just about ready to run out, and we can't complete it unless we get this money.
Yep, that's correct. We have funds that will take us through to the 30th of June this year. To complete the business case, there's another 600,000 that's required. The money that we're currently seeking from the 6 constituent councils will go to that 600,000. Initially, state government requested 100,000 that are, there'd be 100,000 from each of the constituent councils to cover that amount. Of course, that was never going to occur. Councils, unfortunately, don't have that money. But the step back position is that if we can get close to 300,000, we're hoping that the state government will fund the remainder of the amount required to complete the business case. The option is that if they don't do that, we have to pull back on some of the investigations that have been identified.
Councillor Greatwich.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. Hello. I just wanted to, I suppose it's a broader question around, it seems to be that the catalyst for coming back to revisit this question hinges on Concordia and discussions that have been had with Department of Environment and Water, and that being a compelling, certainly from reading the CEO's report, that seems to be a compelling catalyst to sort of bring that back to the council chamber and consider essentially revoking our previous position and now looking to support this moving forward. I suppose my mind turns to the fact that Concordia didn't just immediately arise out of the mist, a couple of weeks ago. We've known that was coming down the pipeline for quite some time. So to my mind, those considerations would have already been part of the discussion. We had a very clear sense of how many houses would be in that development and resultant stormwater runoff and that sort of thing. So to me, I'm just trying to understand because I noted the wording in the CEO's report was that this is a materially different scenario that's in front of us now, and I just wanted to understand that a little bit more, if I may.
Yes, perhaps I can start by saying that the council benefits from that, irrespective of Concordia. The council benefits from the system that we have in place to dispose of water runoff from the catchment into the Gawler River and then out to the coast from there. It has done, for all the time that the watercourse has been in place. I think the catchment area for the Gawler River is 1,000 square kilometres. Barossa area within that catchment, or the area of catchment, is just over 600 square kilometres. So it's quite considerable. So every time it rains and you get runoff, the property owners within the catchment derive some benefit from being able to dispose water, and obviously the council as well. So Concordia certainly puts a different light on what we're trying to achieve. It's going to have an impact, and we have to account for that. But even if Concordia weren't to go ahead, we still have the issue that we've got to deal with, and Barossa Council being the upstream and council, and unfortunately contributing to the majority of the flow into the Gawler River, has, I'll use this word, an obligation, if you like, to be party to finding a solution to the problem.
Look, can I just keep everything to questions, because some of the items will come up in debate in a moment, and you can debate some of the issues associated with what Mr. Baldwin's presented here tonight, as well as what the CEO's presented there. So, Councillor De Reeves, you have a specific question?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. We've been told that it's not our water, it's actually the state government's water, and yet you've just said that there's an obligation for us to be responsible for the state government's water. How do you square that circle?
I'm not sure where that statement's come from, but the state government will say to us that in legislative terms, local government is responsible for the management of stormwater.
So we can that's okay.
Councillor, I think we know the answer to that one. It's something, when we first started to talk about this project and committees were formed, it was one thing that I mentioned to Kate Hart, the Executive Director for Department for Environment and Water, and that is that knowing that that question might come, that the state government really needs to have a look at where it is with the review of the Barossa water allocation plan. And I think that has to be done in conjunction with the work that's being done here with the business case. And they have said that that's part of the intent. They will look at integrated water management and look at the potential to catch and hopefully bring water back into the Barossa for whatever purpose might be. I would hope that it is genuine. The discussion that we've had would indicate that integrated water management is an important part of the process that we're working through. What's going to come out of that, I'm not sure, but we can only keep pushing Department for Environment and Water and state government to see that that sort of outcome is achievable at some point in time in the future.
I think there is a number of other studies that have been undertaken about the water security and all of those things associated with it. Look, I'll take a couple more questions and then I think we'll move on. So Councillor Greatwich and then Councillor Angus, and then I think we'll leave the rest for the debate a little bit later in the agenda.
Thank you. A brief follow-up question. I understand, and I may be recalling this incorrectly, but I note on the agenda on page 110, there's a summary of the other constituent councils noting their current positions, and there's a little note just before that saying that, you know, presently all councils are reviewing their funding positions. That summary seems to show that essentially everyone is now in some form of support and providing some form of funding. The majority, it's the $52,000 as requested, and I think that one of them is around $10,000. My question is, have any of those councils changed their position in recent times based on the kind of revised level of discussion that's happening?
Adelaide Plains Council and Adelaide Hills Council in particular agreed to contribution, but with condition that they would only contribute if all other councils contributed on an equal basis. So what we've done, obviously the authority has asked me to address this council and see if we can get a change of direction for this council. Adelaide Plains, I've spoken with Adelaide Plains Council and also Adelaide Hills Council. Their meetings will follow this one, so obviously they'll be looking at what decision flows from this council meeting, but the intent, as we understand, is that both those councils will lift the restriction in terms of the contribution. Yep.
Councillor Angus, Ian, can you just shut this off? Councillor Angus?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Ian. I'm curious about the wording or the description of a business case. We know, I think it's less of a business case. We're on a problem-solving mission, are we not? Because everyone knows it's doing $40 million worth of damage every time it floods. What are we actually achieving with this so-called business case? Are we finding out the actual cost of solving the problem? Because in my mind, that's not a business case. And I think we're using the wrong words. I'm not against us necessarily contributing, but a business case kind of solves a problem and gives someone an advantage, which is in effect, I guess, what's happening. But we know the issues, we know the problems, we know the costs of it. We don't, and I'm really staggered that it's 600,000 and counting just to work out a solution. Is that what we're aiming at?
Certainly, the cost, the overall cost of the business case at completion December this year, if it is followed through as proposed, will be just over $2 million. It's quite considerable. The amount of effort that's going into this from the various state government departments, Treasury, Agriculture, Aquaculture, you name it. There's departments all involved all the way through, providing information, undertaking investigation to find the best option for the work to be done. So it seems a lot, but there's a lot of effort being paid. I mean, if you're going to look at a project that's 100 million plus to resolve the issues that we have in the Gawler River, a $2 million investigation is probably appropriate. So it is, yes, we're heading to, we're hoping, we will have direction in terms of what needs to be done. We will have a costing. It then provides us the opportunity to start working with state and federal government to look at how that capital investment can be put in place.
Thanks, Mr. Baldwin, and thanks for coming along and making your presentation. And as I said earlier, that council will make its decision a little bit later when we get to that agenda item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, we now move to 3.3.1, which is notice of motions that's been put forward by Councillor Priest. Councillor Priest, would you like to put that motion? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. The motion's been put by Councillor Priest that Kalimna Road footpath be put into this year's budget for the research road to Murray Street, Nurayupta, on the southern side of the road. That motion has been put. Councillor Schilling.
Thank you. Yes, before I second this motion, I'd like to ask a process question of the CEO if there's an alternative safety solution rather than proceeding with the full $1.7 million road upgrade, which I understand will be activated when future housing developments happen in that vicinity, which will make that road even busier than it currently is. So it currently has a real safety issue occurring, and yeah, that's my question before I second the motion.
CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Councillor. The easiest solution that I've had a conversation with staff recently is if you put it on the other side of the road and you run it from Fallon to the main street. Simple solution. And then when that other area is developed and we've got the levy back, that is earmarked to obviously do the full solution. I could bring something back to a future workshop.
Okay, well, that's not the motion that we have before us at the moment, I'll point out, but that's a progress question I'll take. Is there a seconder for the recommendation that we have there? For the lack of a seconder, we'll move on to the next item, and that is 3.3.2, and that is a double bridge to be built on the Research Road, Nurayupta, on page 10. Once again, Councillor Priest, that's a motion that you've put. You're putting that motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a seconder to the motion? With the not getting a second to the motion, we will now move to the next motion, which is 3.3, that council accelerate its footpath program from 10 years to 5 years. Councillor Priest, that's your motion that you
I
wish
would
to...
wish to withdraw that, as per my email last night.
Well, I guess if I don't get a seconder, it'll withdraw itself, councillor. So is there a seconder to the Oh, you don't want to move? Oh, sorry. Okay. Thank you. All right. So you're withdrawing that motion. Thank you. All right. My apologies. And 3.3.4 on page 16 is that council defer the big project for a minimum of 4 years. Councillor Priest?
I wish to withdraw that motion as well.
Thank you, Councillor Priest. Members, we move on to the Mayor's report on page 19, and Mr Carter has joined us, and I'd just like to point out to the work staff and Mr Carter, and pass on to the staff, I've been somewhat absolutely impressed with the standard of our lawn mowing that we've now taken over and brought back in-house, and with an undertaking that when you've put forward it with this, with your gentleman that was with you, Tom, I think it was it Tom? Yeah. There was potentially savings and a probably improved service level, and I must say that the comments that I'm getting and the evidence throughout the area, can you please pass on appreciation of the wonderful job that's been evident without the community as far as that particular service, and I can name a number of others, so thank you. Mayor's report, any questions? I think Councillor Barrett beat you. Yeah, sorry, Councillor Barrett.
I had a question, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Let me find the page first. Fire away.
It's off the first particular item, with the footpaths of Mount Pleasant, with the withdrawal of funding by DIT a couple of years ago. Did the conversation encompass Mount Pleasant this time round, and is the funding assured for this time round?
I can assure you that there was much conversation about Mount Pleasant and just where we're up to with our works program and the work that council has allocated in its budget. And talking to the CEO, it's more than happy to schedule, let us do our work, and then they'll come in and do their work. And that was part of the conversation, along with other items that we brought up. So yes, answer to your question. Councillor Greatwich.
I appreciate that we're only on page 19, so just a
Beg your
quick
pardon?
question. I appreciate that we're only on page 19, so a very brief question, which was just to pick up on the meeting with Tony Piccolo around boundary reform and whether you're able to give a slightly, any kind of sense of what was discussed in that meeting.
It was very much an update at that particular time, and I'm hoping that we can bring a further update shortly. And so it was really just where we were as far as council's position and our letter that we've sent back to the commission at this point. But I'm anticipating that we may have something further to bring back to the chamber. Thank you. Councillor De Vries, was you moving that a moment ago? Yeah. Moved Councillor De Vries and seconded Councillor Greatwich. All those in favour? Carried. Matters for information. Is there any matters that elected members need clarifying with regard to the matters for information? If not, we'll move on to the debate agenda. Page 96, 7.2.1 is the asset management policy review, that council, having reviewed the updated asset management policy, adopt the policy as presented in attachment 1. Someone move the policy? Councillor Angus? And seconded Councillor De Vries. You wish to speak? Councillor De Vries?
Councillor Angus doesn't want to speak.
Any other comments? All those in favour? Carried. Page 102 is the Noack Road alignment and the execution of the clause for the road order. And that is to finalise that document authorising the Chief Executive Officer to sign the necessary documentation. Moved Councillor Barrett and seconded Councillor Hearn. Do you either one wish to speak? All those in favour? Carried. And that was an amendment I overlooked. Monthly report on 104, page 104, the monthly report. And that's the uniform presentation of the finances report, provides information as to the financial position of council, including notes and material financial trends and transactions. It's a recommendation that we receive and note the monthly report as at the 30th of April 2023, as per the attachment 1. Councillor De Vries and seconded Councillor Barrett. Either one wish to speak? All those in favour? Carried. Page 107 is the further review for the request for additional funding for the Gawler River Flood Management Authority, the business case and associated flood management plan with a recommendation 1 and 2. So we need to deal with recommendation 1 first.
I have a question, Your Worship.
Yep.
I'm kind of willing to go in approval of 1 and 2, but Mr. Baldwin mentioned that I guess they were talking about putting on the table the idea that we might be able to potentially harvest water. Do we need to, this is a question for the CEO, in order to make that sort of conditional, do we need to change this motion, or can that be inferred through the motion itself?
CEO.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The council actually has to deal with the revocation before I can probably even answer that. But, because with the water, I did try to chime in, the water allocation plan is actually under review right now.
Yeah.
So that is actually already happening.
So that we don't need to
No.
tighten the language, this
The water allocation plan, in my view, is a different issue to this particular issue. But the water allocation plan is already currently under review as we speak. So we can get you an updated briefing on that if you need. Yep.
Okay, we'll deal with that recommendation 1. Councillor Priest, yes?
I just want to move the motions.
Thank you. It's moved, Councillor Priest. Oh, look, I think what I'll do is we've got to deal with the revocation first. So the revocation then gives us an ability to debate it and ask the questions for the next recommendation. So is there a seconder? Then we can move on from there. So there's a seconder to the recommendation 1. Councillor Angus, Councillor Priest, do you want to say anything about the revocation that's before us?
Not one, but I will speak on recommendation 2.
Yep, okay. Councillor Angus?
The director was going to say something.
We can do that.
Yeah, I think I want to deal with this one first and then we can deal with that in part 2. Recommendation 1's been put for the revocation. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Now we'll move on to the recommendation 2, which gets down to the matter that we sort of Mr. Baldwin spoke to earlier, and that's about our contribution. And
So moved.
yep, moved Councillor Priest, and I'll get a seconder, and then we'll work from there. Is there a seconder? Councillor Angus. Councillor Priest, speak to the motion.
Yes. I think this is very important that this council does contribute $52,000 because the discussions we have had at the GMA meeting last was that if councils don't put money in, even $52,000, the state government will come down and say, because the ministers are getting quite sick of this actually, that no one's putting all this money in that's required at $600,000. And the view is that the state government would actually say to us councils, if you don't put the money in that's required, we'll legislate to force you to put the $600,000 in. So I'd hate to see that. I think this is very important for this council, especially now that Concordia has gotten the go-ahead and the possibility of needing $100 million to be spent on that dam alone to raise it. So because we now know that in 2 years' time there's going to be houses being built there, we do really need to get on board with this program and vote 52,000 to get this business plan up and going, because they're nearly out of money, if not out of money.
Councillor Angus, do you speak to the motion?
Thanks, Jeff. Yes, thank you, Mayor. I concur with Councillor Priest. I think we will be dragged to the table kicking and screaming if we don't volunteer in the first instance, and I think we're in a better position to do it now rather than later. But this problem is so large that it is beyond local government, clearly, and if the state government wants us all bankrupt, then they can legislate that we pay, but it won't achieve anything. But I think we do have to be seen to be in the mix.
The CEO just wants to make a comment.
I just thought I'd answer the questions that are sort of standing on the table. And Mr Mavronac talked about the water allocation plan. As I was thinking about it, Councillor DeVries, I can put that in the correspondence as well as a reasonable direction. Councillor Grantwich, the answer to your question in my mind around why material now, which so my analysis and my thinking around that is that pretty much in the last 6 weeks, and very much at the briefing that we had at GRFMA, the live option of raising the dam and creating infrastructure that is efficient to reach that east-west corridor became real. Prior to that, we'd absolutely talked about all sorts of options. One of the other main options that GRFMA has also talked about is levy banks and other solutions, which would have had no overall beneficial impact. So that's why I have put the analysis in that type of direction. Absolutely, you're 150% correct. Concordia's been in the wind for a long, long time, but it's the first time in the last 6 to 8 weeks it's actually truly been live as a solution.
Councillor DeVries.
Yeah, there's a couple of points. I will be supporting this, but in regards to the threat of legislation from the state government, that kind of almost makes me want to vote against it, because if they're going to take us kicking and screaming, I want them to know, so that when they come back and say, why are you not putting downward pressure on rates, we can point to them and say, well, there's your legislation to demonstrate that. So that sort of threat does not impress me in the slightest. In regards to this whole business, I'm willing to offer up the 52,020, but I do want to actually see money flowing upriver as well as down. This was something that Brian Hearn used to talk about. I'm going to beat this dead horse as long as I'm going to. We've been told that the watercourses are owned by the state government. I'm sick and tired of that water being bad water and then it's ours, but when it's good water, we can't harvest it. And I think this needs to change. I think the CEO knows exactly where I'm going, and I'm expecting this to find its way into the correspondence. But I guess for Mr. Baldwin as well, who I know is listening in, we've been promised a lot of things in the past, and often I feel we've been let down. We were dragged kicking and screaming into this deal in the first place on the assurance that this would deal with it. It would be a 1 in 100 and that'd be the end of it. And as you all heard, that didn't last for very long. And so I feel we were sold a pup at the beginning, but you know, such is life. I would like to see some good faith from the state government. If that is water which in theory we're responsible for, then I think we should be allowed to harvest it. And I'd like to actually find out once and for all whether we are or we aren't. So I think this should be part of the business case. And I'll be watching this very, very closely. And quite frankly, if I think that we're being dudded yet again, that'll be it for me. I'm sort of at that, you know, fool me once, shame on you. I really feel like this is it. This is their last chance to prove they are genuine about trying to help this valley.
My sequence has all changed a little bit now, so Councillor Hearn, but then I've got Mr. Mavronek.
Yeah, I concur with the comments of Councillor De Vries, and he mentioned it previously. In this chamber, we've debated several times being able to harvest our water and put it into aquifers, and we've been given a definite no. Somehow or other, I think there should be a condition attached to this to say yes, you can. And we asked Mr. Baldwin, and there wasn't a definitive answer either. And I think it's important that we actually, if they're going to take a stand, I think we should be taking a stand as well to say yes. If you do this and support it, then we should be allowed to harvest the water, because if we've got 60% of the area, 600 square miles, then I think we should get a little bit of up, as Brian Hearn, former mayor, spoke about. So I think that's important, whether it could be changed, but at this stage I'll be voting no because of that simple equation.
Yes.
Thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to, in terms of a couple of the comments and questions as well, just further to the water allocation plan. So yes, it is been under review for quite a number of years by the Landscape Board, and it's due to be updated hopefully in the next 12 to 18 months. There's obviously a legislative process that the Landscape Board has to go through, including community consultation regarding that. Clearly, one of the key principles that this council has held is in terms of the ability to allow for aquifer storage and recovery, and that's something that the board is seriously looking at, so to allow us to actually capture and reuse some of that stormwater that is occurring within the catchment. So that is definitely something that is on the agenda for the board. In addition to, there's a new project that's been initiated by government. As you know, there's the Barossa Water Security Strategy. The government, and which is now being led by SA Water, is to develop a new resilient water futures strategy for Greater Adelaide. So SA Water are leading that, and the first workshop was actually held last week, which I attended, and that is to look at our water supply and demand and capacity for sustaining growth within the Greater Adelaide region, because ultimately our water supply cannot rely purely on the River Murray and our reservoirs. So the notion of what the water allocation plan to unlock some of that potential is recognised by that group. And the final point I just want to make in terms of the business case, the representative from Jew presented to the working group for the Concordia Growth Area at their last meeting, and obviously the issue of raising the Bruce Eastwick Dam and the east-west connection was a major point of conversation for that working group. And as per the briefing that we received from the representatives from the department on Concordia, you recall it was very much focused on infrastructure and the infrastructure scheme that is allowed under the PDI Act. So clearly, in terms of future funding for the raising of the dam, is something that may be offset by the developers long term as well. So that's something that needs to be considered inside the mix.
Thank you, Mr Mabranak. Councillor Greatwich.
Thank you. I don't think that my horse is quite flogged to death yet, like yours, Councillor De Vries, but it's looking pretty wobbly. I guess the point that I really wanted to just come back to was, again, we've known about Concordia for quite some time. Similarly, like I take your point, Mr McCarthy. I just look at your nameplate. Yeah, mine's fine, Mr CEO. That the material information that's come to light is around the potential to raise the dam, and that this was kind of the first time that had been introduced in a live fashion. I suppose my question is around process, because kind of what I'm hearing around the chamber is that there's now an appetite to, we've revoked a previous decision that was made, and to my recollection that was actually a unanimous decision of the chamber previously, and now here we are, very short time frame afterwards, with a feeling around the room that actually we're going to revoke that and now we're going down this path. So my question is around process, and it seems to me that I'm not an expert in water management or water infrastructure by any stretch of the imagination, but I would have imagined that the option to raise a dam would have actually been in the consideration mix for quite some time. So what I'm trying to get to a sense of is it's not just kind of throwing things at the council and hoping that something sticks, but in fact that there is a sense that perhaps I'm certainly not getting, that there is a very sober, strategic process that's being played out here, rather than just suddenly going, oh, the thing that's going to get it over the line is recommending to raise the dam height. I appreciate this is enormously important to Mr Baldwin and his group and to all of the constituent councils that are involved, and I just am looking for some reassurance that in fact there is a deeper strategic position that's being rolled out here.
The CEO, just
Thanks.
to address that question. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Councillor. The fundamental raising of the dam has always been an option, as has levy banks, as has various other engineering solutions. The live option is the culmination of potentially putting a road on top of it as well. That has never really been a live option. Is it throwing options at the council? Not in my view, but it certainly does enliven, in my view, and as you've read in the report, the benefits that can now exist for our community, which has always been the position I'd previously put to you. In terms of process, this is an entirely reasonable process to new information, new position, different strategic direction, and in fact I'll argue that quite properly it's the unique thing about local government that it has this mechanism. The other governments don't. In terms of, while I've got the floor, if I can just answer Councillor Hearn and provide a little bit of advice, I would be really reticent to add an additional condition on a recommendation like this when the GRFMA has absolutely no legislative or other powers to do anything about aquifer recharge. If what you would prefer is a update on the water allocation plan, to me they're two separate issues. We can absolutely get that to the next meeting and reiterate the submissions that we've already made on multiple occasions to water allocation planning, that the issue of aquifer recharge needs to be addressed in our area, because at the moment it's not legislatively available to us.
Yeah, look, thanks, and I think, yeah. Councillor Priest, have you got a question, or because if I let you speak, that closes the debate. So, any other people want to speak for or against?
Thank you. My quick question is, if we are to consider moving forward with this, with the money, the 52,000, is there any guarantee that we're not going to be approached down the path and asked for more? If the financial position is so perilous as what we hear today, that's just my question. Thank you.
Good question.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Simple answer, no.
That's it. We don't know.
We can make this conditional, though, to saying it's a one-off contribution and it finishes there. That's my proposal. Because if people are in financial straits as such, and they do need that volume of money, if they don't already have surety from other contributors that they have it, They do? They do.
Well, I'm inclined to think that, look, if council agrees to this recommendation here, the 52,000, if they run out of money, they come back and you can just say no, say we've already coughed up once, or you can decide based on the information that's presented, if there's something that you think you need to have, well then so be it. So look, I think we just stay with the recommendation we've got in front of us at this time.
Once we've passed this, all the other councils will fall in line.
Yeah, that's been stated. Look, any other
Okay,
questions?
thank you.
Yeah, there was a lot of good questions, but I do think that it's time now. We have to be in this, and I think now because of Concordia is said, we're going ahead with Concordia now, and the possibility of this dam need to be raised because of it. I think this is a good outcome that instead of 100,000, we're going to put in 52,000. So I'd urge you all to vote yes to this. Thank you.
Council had the debate. All those in favour of the recommendation? Carried. Thank you.
I've been more confident raising my hand in the past.
Members, will move on to page 147, which is the leases and licence. Oh, sorry, 31, sorry. I jumped a little line there. 7.2.5, 131, thank you. 131. There's a recommendation that council, having reviewed the budget update for 2022-2023 as of the 31st of March 2023, attachment 1, adopt the budget update report and budget variations, including the reserve transfer contained therein. Someone like to move that motion?
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Moved Councillor De Vries and seconded Councillor Hearn. Either one wish to speak to it? Councillor Angus, you have a quick... Oh, all in favour? Okay, thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Now we get to 147. 147 is the I've got to get to that page myself. $147 is the lease licence and hire permit policy. Remember, we had some information provided to us at the recent workshop. There's a recommendation that we endorse the public consultation in relation to the draft lease licence and permit policy in accordance with the council's public consultation policy, and requires officers to bring back a report to council once we have written submissions. Yes?
Can we just give a couple of quick updates? Mrs. Mohan's got a little bit of further information from the solicitors, not material, and we've got a slightly amended resolution to show you.
Okay, thank you. Go, thank
Through
you.
Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Moore.
Thank you. We received an update from our solicitors post the release of the public agenda, and that information recommended some minor amendments to the policy based on the current legislative position, particularly in relation to the act that we had referred to throughout the documentation around retail and that side of things. And so we've made some minor amendments, and we're recommending that those amendments are adopted prior to public consultation, because they improve the validity of the document overall, but they don't materially impact the policy settings or the direction or the principles under which the document is made. A lot of it is minor amendments to the language in terms of the legalese behind it, but the primary I guess, policy position or the change in terms of the Act was around some of those principles that don't necessarily apply in the current settings. Sorry, I'm looking for the detailed reference for you right now to provide that level of assurance. The Retail and Commercial Leases Act. had some particular amendments that are relevant to this, and it actually eases the restrictions on our stakeholders even further than we'd originally positioned the document to do so. And so we are proposing that we do those amendments prior to public consultation so that it's a fulsome document to the community in, under those revised settings.
So, Mr Mayor, the recommendation is fundamentally the same, but you're giving me authorisation to make those minor grammatical reference and other little amendments. And the reality is it's consultation, it still needs to come back to you in any case.
So you'll still have another opportunity, but we'll go through the consultation based on the recent information that's been provided tonight. Councillor De Vries.
I'm going to move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. You're happy with the amended? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I'll second.
Second. So Councillor
It's
De
all-
Vries, you want to speak?
Yeah, this is one of those, yes, Prime Minister, courageous decisions, but I think it's long overdue. We've put this off for God knows how long, and it sounds like the impression is that the community is willing to accept this. There will be winners, there will be losers, but I think that it seems like we're never going to get anywhere if we don't at least run it up the flagpole. I'm full of metaphors tonight. So with that in mind, I think I applaud the staff. I think you've done a fantastic job getting us this far. I think the community will come back. There will be some who will be upset. I think the majority will probably be okay with it, and I think this is where ultimately the council will have to be courageous, but I think this is something that we need to do.
Councillor Schilling?
No, I just wanted to echo Councillor De Vries' comments about well done to the staff, that the work that they've done in this. We know that this has been a very difficult one to pull together, so appreciate the time and the effort and the professionalism that's gone into putting this together and finally drawing a line in the sand of somewhere to where from here, so well done.
Absolutely. Any other comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Carried. Page 166, which is under the Development and Community Services, is the temporary closure of the Newry and Mount Pleasant Libraries, page 166. And that approves that for some days to undertake some specific work within the libraries. Moved Councillor Hearn, and I think Councillor Barrett, you pipped Councillor Evans by a small percentage. Either one wish to speak to it? Oh.
No, it's necessary to do the work.
Councillor Priest?
Oh, just a question.
Yep.
What sort of notification are we going to give the residents of the Barossa Council area, or notification about this? Because a lot of people don't have the internet, especially the elderly.
Through the Mayor, besides the internet, the staff will have public notices at the entrances of all the buildings to advise them, and obviously in terms of the lead up, we can keep, in terms of our current users of the library, we can keep them informed of the closures.
Yeah, Councillor Priest, there is that sort of comment in the community. It talks about posters displayed in the libraries, verbal reminders to existing customers and a whole range of other things. So you're happy with that explanation?
I'd like to see a lot of verbal. When people come in, I'd like the possibility of having a staff member at the door, and when people come in to change their books over or to get new books, that someone from the libraries actually speak to them.
Yeah, well, that is in that community engagement that talks about the verbal reminders to the existing customers, and I guess when they're at the counter, so I think that covers that. Any other comments? All those in favour? Carried. (168) is the 7.5.2, which is the library, the trial of the new library hours outcome on page 168. And there's a recommendation there, and it looks as though they've been functioning under that sort of operation for a little while now, and I think we've had some discussion at the workshop. So is anyone prepared to move the motion? Councillor Greatwich, and seconded Councillor Priest. Councillor Greatwich, you speak to it? Councillor Priest? Any other comments? All those in favour? Carried. Page 172 is ratifying Council's submission to the State Planning Commission amendment to Springwood Land Development at Calbeeba. And there's a recommendation that Council's submission contained in Attachment 1 be ratified to the Commission. Someone prepared to move? Councillor De Vries. Councillor Schilling. Councillor De Vries, you wish to speak to it? Councillor Schilling. Any other comments? All those in favour? Carried. Page 266, which is 7.5.4, is the mobile food vendor policy and location rules, and that Council, having considered the draft mobile food vendor policy and the location rules as contained in Attachment 1, endorse the policy and the location rules for implementation. Is there a mover? Councillor Hearn. Councillor Greatwich is the seconder. Councillor Hearn.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I think there's been a lot of discussion over the years, and we like all the things that we've been doing of late. We've finally got an excellent policy, so encourage everyone to endorse it.
Councillor Greatwich.
I'd just like to say that I think that in the recommendation or in the summary it notes that it's a balanced approach that's been taken. I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge that there is often a tension between sort of bricks and mortars, hospitality operators and mobile food vendors, and you see this really frequently. And so I think that this is probably one of the best approaches that I've seen. I've spent a disordinate amount of time reading mobile food vendor policies from various local governments. So I think this is a really good balance that's been struck here.
Thank you. Any other comments? All those in favour? Carried. Page 276, which is the order making policy, and that we endorse a phase of public consultation in relation to the amended order making policy. And we endorse the amended order making policy at the immediate conclusion of the public consultation. Is there a mover? Councillor Barrett. Seconder. Councillor Angus. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say, you've got to give Mr Turley sufficient tools to do his work, so that's why I'm saying everyone get on board with this one.
All those in favour? Carried. The Dogs Bylaw 5, 288, page 288. And there's a recommendation there that I'm sure you've all digested and understand, and I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved Councillor Hearn. And seconded Councillor Schilling. Councillor Hearn. Councillor Schilling. Any other comments? All those in favour? Carried. Council, that concludes our agenda for the May meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday, the 20th of June at 5:30. Thank you for your contribution and your attendance. I'll formally close the May meeting. Thank you. Do anyone want a little, I think we all need a 5-minute stretch at least.